The doctor took me to a secret room and said he wanted to kiss me, and I did. It started as just another late shift at the hospital, the kind where the fluorescent lights buzz louder than the silence in the halls. I thought it would be routine, checkups, charts, and long hours of waiting for emergencies that may or may not come. But then he walked in. His presence was different, commanding yet calm, the kind of presence that makes you stop breathing for a second. He looked at me as if he already knew something about me that I hadn't dared to admit myself. What happened that night wasn't planned. It wasn't written in the schedule or part of any protocol. It was a moment that shattered the walls I'd built around my heart. He asked me to follow him, down the quiet corridor, away from the noise of the world, into a room no one else used. And when the door clicked shut behind us, he turned, his voice low, and said he wanted to kiss me. Every part of me wanted to run. But every part of me also wanted to stay. What do you do when the line between fear and desire vanishes in the span of a heartbeat? Stay with me until the end of this story, because what happened in that secret room changed everything I thought I knew about myself, about trust, and about love. And if you believe in stories that challenge the rules, that push boundaries, and that remind us passion can be found in the most unexpected places, make sure you subscribe now, like this video, and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss what happens next. The hospital at night has its own rhythm, a pulse that beats slower but heavier than during the day. The fluorescent lights hum faintly, the smell of antiseptic lingers in every corner, and footsteps echo down empty corridors like secrets waiting to be told. I'd worked plenty of late shifts before, but that night felt different from the moment it began. I first saw him when I was restocking supplies. Dr. Adrian Cole. He wasn't just another physician, everyone knew him. He had this presence that filled a room without him needing to say a word. His patients trusted him instinctively, and the staff respected him, even when his standards were impossibly high. But for me, it wasn't just admiration. Every time he passed me in the hall, every time he looked at me across the nurse's station, something sparked in my chest that I didn't want to name. That night, his gaze lingered longer than usual. I was arranging gauze boxes when I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. When I looked up, he was leaning casually against the counter, his arms crossed, eyes locked on mine. "You work too hard," he said, his voice low, carrying through the quiet space. I forced a small laugh. "Comes with the job." He tilted his head slightly, studying me as though I was a puzzle he intended to solve. "Maybe. But not everyone pushes themselves the way you do." His words shouldn't have meant so much, but they did. For a moment, I couldn't find anything to say, so I went back to stacking the supplies. My hands trembled more than I wanted to admit. Later, as I was finishing rounds, I felt his presence again. He was waiting near the elevator, coat slung over one arm. The corridor was nearly empty, the world narrowed down to just us. "You're still here," he said. "So are you." He smiled faintly, and in that smile was something that unsettled me. "Come with me," he said simply. I hesitated. "Where?" He didn't answer, just gestured for me to follow. Against my better judgment, I did. My shoes echoed against the tile as we walked past darkened offices, past the pharmacy, until we reached a door I'd never paid much attention to. He unlocked it with a key card and pushed it open. It was a small, quiet room, unused, almost forgotten. A single desk sat in the corner, files stacked neatly, the window shades drawn. The hum of the hospital felt far away here, like we'd stepped outside of time. When the door shut behind us, I turned to him, my heart pounding. "Why are we here?" He stepped closer, his expression unreadable, though his eyes told a story his mouth hadn't yet dared to. "Because I couldn't keep pretending." I swallowed hard. "Pretending what?" "That I don't think about you," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "That I don't notice the way you carry yourself, the way you never complain no matter how hard the night gets, the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching." Heat rose in my chest. My instincts told me to deny it, to laugh it off, but the truth pressed too heavily against my ribs. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "Then don't say anything," he replied, stepping closer still. He was so near now I could see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the tired lines beneath his eyes. Just hear me. I want to kiss you. And I'm telling you because I don't want to cross a line without your choice. The room shrank around us, the silence almost unbearable. My pulse roared in my ears, my body pulled in two directions at once, fear on one side, desire on the other. You can't just say that, I managed, my voice shaking. I had to, he said softly. Because if I didn't, I'd regret it. And I think you would too. Every instinct told me this was dangerous. That crossing this line could change everything. But another voice, the one I'd been silencing for weeks, was louder now. It told me this was real, that what I felt wasn't imagined. He lifted a hand, slow enough for me to pull back if I wanted to, and brushed his fingers lightly against my arm. The touch was careful, tentative, but it sent a shiver straight through me. Say something, he urged. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. My body was already answering for me, leaning in despite every warning flashing in my mind. That's when a sharp knock rattled the door. We both froze. Dr. Cole? A voice called from the hallway. We need you in ER. Now. He closed his eyes briefly, exhaling a curse under his breath. His hand dropped from my arm, the space between us suddenly colder, emptier. I have to go, he said reluctantly, his eyes lingering on mine as if trying to memorize this moment. But this isn't over. And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the dim room, my heart still racing, the taste of almost on my lips. I didn't sleep after that night. Even when I went home and tried to lie down, every time I closed my eyes I saw the way he looked at me in that secret room. The certainty in his voice, the hesitation in his hand as it brushed my arm, and the promise in his final words. This isn't over. The next day, I replayed it all while I moved through the motions of my shift. But when morning blurred into afternoon and I still hadn't seen him, doubt began to creep in. What if it had been nothing more than a reckless impulse, one he regretted the moment the door closed behind him? When I finally did see him, it was in the cafeteria. He was surrounded by colleagues, talking easily, confident as ever. He laughed at something one of them said, and for a second it was as though the night before had never happened. My stomach sank. Maybe I had imagined it, maybe I had read too much into the heat of the moment. Then his eyes flicked across the room and landed on me. Just a second too long, but long enough. My breath caught, and before I could look away, he did it for me, turning back to his group as though I didn't exist. The message was clear. Not here, not now. Hours later, near the end of my shift, I was logging patient notes when I felt him behind me. I didn't have to turn to know. His voice was low, careful. Follow me. I hesitated. Adrian. But he was already walking down the corridor. Against every logical thought in my head, I followed. He led me to the stairwell this time, deserted and quiet. He leaned against the railing, his posture casual, but his eyes burned with something more. About last night, he started. My heart thudded. I thought you were going to pretend it never happened. I couldn't, he said, shaking his head. But we have to be careful. People notice things. That's why he trailed off, his jaw tightening. Why you ignored me? I finished for him. He winced. It wasn't about you. It was about keeping this safe. I wanted to believe him. I did. But the memory of his laughter with his colleagues in the cafeteria was still raw. Safe from what? I asked. His gaze softened. From becoming gossip. From being something we can't control once it leaves our hands. I didn't answer. My silence stretched, and he stepped closer, his voice dropping. Do you really think I'd risk saying those words to you last night if I didn't mean them? My chest tightened. I wanted to say no, I didn't think he would. But before I could, the stairwell door banged open. A nurse stepped in, glanced at us, and froze. Adrian reacted instantly. I was just giving her some feedback, he said smoothly. Carry on. The nurse nodded awkwardly and slipped past us, leaving the door to swing shut again. As soon as it closed, I pulled back. Feedback. His expression was pained. You know why I said that? Yes, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Because admitting the truth would have been too costly. He didn't argue. He just looked at me like he wanted to reach out but couldn't. That night, I went home torn between two truths. The way his eyes softened when no one else was watching, and the way he shut it down the moment someone might notice. The push and pull continued over the next few days. Small moments. His hand brushing mine as he passed me a chart, the way his voice softened when we spoke alone, the way he always found a reason to be near me. But in public, he was careful, too careful. And then came the revelation. We were covering the ER together during a hectic evening. A young boy came in after an accident, and while Adrian worked on him, I assisted, holding instruments, steadying the mother with soft words. The boy was fine, thankfully, but the tension of the moment left us both raw. Afterward, in the supply room, Adrian turned to me suddenly. "I need you to understand something." My heart raced. "What?" He looked away, as though searching for the right words. "I've been in this position before. Years ago. And it almost destroyed everything I'd built. My career, my reputation. I can't." He stopped, then met my eyes. "I can't go through that again." The room tilted around me. "So last night, all of this, it doesn't mean anything?" "Of course it does," he said quickly. "But meaning something and being possible aren't always the same." His words cut deeper than I expected. I stared at him, my throat tight. "So you're telling me to just forget it?" His expression wavered. "I'm telling you I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this." The honesty in his voice scared me more than denial would have. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then a voice called from the hallway, pulling us back to reality. He stepped away, his jaw tight. "This conversation isn't over," he said, echoing the words from that first night. But this time, I wasn't sure if he meant it as a promise or a warning. The days after his confession were harder than the nights I spent on call. His words echoed in my head, circling like vultures. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this." Every time I saw him in the hallway, my chest tightened. He wasn't avoiding me exactly. He still found reasons to stop by my station, to ask about a patient, to stand close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, but his eyes told another story. They held something like longing and fear. I hated the in-between. One evening, I was assigned to shadow him on rounds. It should have been routine, but nothing about walking at his side felt routine anymore. Every word he spoke, every glance he gave, carried weight. Patients smiled at him, trusting him completely, and I couldn't help but feel envy, not of them, but of the ease with which he carried himself when the rest of us were drowning in uncertainty. When the rounds ended, I lingered by the nurse's station, hoping he'd say something, anything. Instead, he handed me a chart, his hand brushing mine for just a second too long. "Good work today," he said in a low tone meant only for me. Then he walked away before I could answer. I sat there, gripping the chart like it was an anchor. That single touch undid me more than an hour of silence ever could. The tension came to a breaking point later that week. It was past midnight, the hospital humming quietly with the low rhythm of machines and footsteps. I was restocking in the supply closet when the door opened behind me. It was him. Adrian stepped inside, closing the door softly, leaving just the dim light above us. My heart leapt into my throat. "We can't keep doing this," I blurted before he even spoke. His jaw tightened. "Doing what?" "This dance. Pretending there's nothing between us when we both know there is. Acting like a touch means nothing, like those words in that room didn't matter." He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "You think it's easy for me? I've been fighting myself every day since then." "Then why fight at all?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why not just admit what you want?" "Because wanting and having aren't the same," he said, stepping closer. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, the walls I had built collapsed under the weight of his gaze. "I want you more than I should. But if this comes out wrong, I could lose everything. And so could you." Silence swallowed us. I could hear only the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "I don't care about the risks," I whispered. "You should," he countered. And yet, despite his words, he reached for me. His fingers grazed mine, hesitant at first, then stronger, holding on as if he couldn't stop himself. The air between us thickened. My chest rose and fell too quickly, my skin burning from a touch so simple yet so dangerous. "Adrian," I said, his name shaky on my lips. He stepped even closer, his breath brushing against my cheek. For a moment I thought this was it, the moment he'd finally break the last barrier. His hand cupped the side of my face, his thumb brushing lightly against my jaw. My body leaned into the touch instinctively, my eyes fluttering shut. And then, the hospital intercom crackled, summoning him to the ICU. The sound jolted us both back into reality. He dropped his hand, stepping back as though burned. "I have to go," he said, his voice strained. I stood frozen, my chest aching, the ghost of his touch still warm on my skin. As he left, the door clicking shut behind him, one truth became clearer than ever. He wanted me. But whether that was enough for him to choose me, I still didn't know. The night after the supply closet changed everything. I could still feel his hand on my face, the way my body had leaned into his touch like it belonged there. But it ended the same way it always did, with duty ripping us apart before we could cross that final line. I told myself to focus on work, but that proved impossible. My charts blurred, my conversations drifted. Every time I walked past the ICU, my eyes betrayed me, searching for him. Sometimes he looked up and our gazes collided like sparks. Other times he kept his eyes firmly on his patients, leaving me to wonder if the moment had meant more to me than to him. It all came to a head 2 nights later. A trauma alert went out across the hospital. A multi-car accident had flooded the ER with patients. Chaos surged through the halls, stretchers rolling in, monitors beeping, nurses and doctors shouting instructions. I dove into the storm, my adrenaline steadying me as I rushed to help stabilize a young man with head trauma. Across the room I saw Adrian. He was bent over another patient, his brow furrowed in concentration, his voice firm but calm as he called out vitals. Even in the madness, he was unshakable, commanding. And still, every few minutes, his eyes flicked toward me, just long enough to send my pulse racing. Hours passed in a blur of blood, bandages, and urgent voices. By the time the chaos settled, exhaustion pressed down on everyone. Families were reunited, losses mourned. The ER slowly emptied, leaving only the low hum of machines and the quiet shuffle of staff cleaning up. I ducked into a side room to catch my breath, leaning against the wall. Moments later, Adrian slipped in after me, closing the door. His coat was streaked with blood, his gloves dangling from his hand. His face looked older somehow, worn from the night. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. "You?" He exhaled heavily, dragging a hand through his hair. "I hate nights like this. Too much loss, too many close calls." His eyes softened as they found mine. "I kept looking over to make sure you were still there." The admission punched through my chest. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," he said firmly. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "I don't know how to stop." The room shrank around us, the same dangerous gravity pulling us closer. My body trembled, not from fear but from the weight of everything unsaid. "Then don't," I whispered. For a moment, he looked like he might break, like the walls he had so carefully built were seconds from crumbling. His hand twitched at his side, as though he wanted to reach for me. But then a knock sounded at the door, and the spell shattered. The head nurse poked her head in. "Dr. Cole, administration wants to see you. Now." Adrian stiffened. "Why?" Her expression was tight. "There's talk about tonight. About protocol violations. They're saying you made a call without approval." I felt the air leave the room. "I'll be right there," Adrian said, his jaw tense. She closed the door again, leaving us in silence. "Is it serious?" I asked. His eyes darkened. "If they want it to be." Fear prickled through me. "What can I do?" "Nothing," he said quickly. Then his gaze softened again. "Except, don't leave me alone in this." The plea broke something inside me. I stepped closer, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. "I won't." His eyes locked on mine, and for a second, it felt like he would finally cross the line. His breath brushed against my lips, his hand rising toward my face. And then the door opened again, this time without a knock. It wasn't the nurse. It was another doctor, one known for his sharp eyes and sharper tongue. He froze when he saw us, his gaze darting between Adrian and me, suspicion flashing instantly across his face. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone too casual to be innocent. Neither of us answered. The silence was damning. The other doctor smirked slightly, as if he'd just found the crack he'd been waiting for. "Careful, Cole. Secrets have a way of catching up to people in this place." He left before either of us could speak. The door clicked shut, leaving the weight of his warning heavy in the air. Adrian turned to me, his face pale but his eyes burning with a mix of anger and fear. "This just got more complicated," he said. My stomach twisted. "What do we do now?" His jaw clenched. "We decide if this is worth the fire we're about to walk into." And just like that, the walls of the hospital seemed smaller, the risks larger. For the first time, I realized we weren't just fighting desire, we were fighting time, gossip, and the brutal machine of reputation. But one truth remained, echoing in my chest: I didn't want to let him go. The warning from the other doctor hung over us like smoke after a fire. For days, whispers seemed to follow Adrian wherever he went. I noticed the sideways glances, the quick conversations that stopped when I entered a room. Nothing had been said outright, but the silence felt louder than words. Adrian carried it on his shoulders, pretending to be unaffected, but I could see the weight pressing down on him. His smile for patience was still warm, his voice still steady, but when our eyes met, I saw the storm brewing beneath. I tried to keep my distance, to give him space. But that only made the ache sharper. Every time I saw him turn a corner, every time I caught a glimpse of his profile in the glow of the ICU lights, I wanted to run to him. And yet, fear kept me still. Until the night everything broke open. It was late, the hospital hushed in that strange way it always was at 3 a.m. I was finishing paperwork when my phone buzzed. A single text from Adrian: "Meet me. Room 312. Please." My pulse spiked. I hesitated for barely a second before slipping away, my footsteps echoing down the empty hall. When I pushed open the door, he was already there, pacing. He looked up, and the mask he wore for the world was gone. He looked raw, undone, desperate. "I can't keep doing this," he said the moment the door shut. My chest tightened. "Doing what?" "Pretending." He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "Pretending I don't want you every second of every day. Pretending that I can keep you at a distance when all I want is to hold you close." The words hit me like fire. I felt my breath stutter. "Adrian." He reached for me then, his hands trembling as they framed my face. "I've been a coward," he said softly. "I told myself I was protecting you, protecting my career, protecting us. But the truth is, I've just been afraid. And I can't live afraid anymore." Before I could answer, his lips crashed into mine. The kiss was nothing like the tentative touches we'd shared before. It was hungry, desperate, full of every unspoken word we'd swallowed. His hands gripped the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and I melted into him, my arms wrapping around his waist. The world outside that room ceased to exist. There was no hospital, no rumors, no rules, just us, finally giving in to what had been burning for so long. When we pulled apart, breathless, his forehead rested against mine. "I love you," he whispered. The words were ragged, almost disbelieving, but true. Tears stung my eyes. "I love you too." For a long time, we just stood there, holding each other in the quiet. The fear was still there, but it was different now. It didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like a test we were willing to face together. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. "We'll have to be careful. There will be challenges. People might talk." "Let them," I said firmly. "I'd rather fight for something real than hide from it." His lips curved into a small, relieved smile. He kissed me again, softer this time, reverent. "Then we face it. Together." The storm outside the window had passed, leaving the night strangely still. In that quiet, I realized something important. This wasn't just about passion or the thrill of secrecy. It was about love, the kind that terrified and exhilarated all at once. The kind that made the risk worth it. As I left the room later, my hand still in his, I knew the world might try to pull us apart. But whatever came next, we had already chosen. And sometimes, the bravest act isn't running into the fire. It's letting yourself stay in the heat of love, no matter who tries to put it out. So I'll ask you, what are you still too afraid to admit to yourself? What passion are you holding back because the world might not understand? Love is always a risk. But the greatest stories are written by those who dare to take it. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications. Because sometimes the most powerful journeys begin with a single choice: to stop hiding and start living.